Welcome to PM Express. The debt action program, the deadline expired last Friday. Government, as we speak, and the officials of the finance ministry, they are auditing the numbers, trying to get to a particular number. We'll tell the number very shortly. But the big question that we need to be asking, now that the debt action program appears to be over, and I use the word appears very carefully, because until we hear a formal announcement from the finance ministry, tomorrow is supposed to be the day for settlement of this particular debt action program. And until we hear that, we can't be too certain. And so we wait for that. But we can safely assume now we haven't had an extension. So it presupposes, based on previous experience since the debt action was first launched, that the finance ministry is approaching this with a measure of confidence. But so we need to be asking the what next questions. And one of the central questions that we need to ask tonight is, can the financial sector survive the debt action program? Because even ahead of the official announcement, sources within the finance ministry have told us that they've hit the magic number. The magic number is 80. 80% is what they were looking for. 80% participation. All bondholders, they were expecting at least 80% of them to have subscribed to the debt action program for it to be successful. So this number is a very crucial number. If they miss this target, the debt action program would have been deemed unsuccessful. If it is unsuccessful, we are unable to move to the next step, which is the restructuring of our external debt. If that doesn't happen, we will miss the March IMF Executive Board sitting, and we'll miss out on that IMF Executive Board approval. If we miss the IMF Executive Board approval in March, the economy is facing a major apocalypse. Because can we stay to the next Executive Board meeting? Many economists say that will be near impossible because of the dwindling foreign exchange reserves this country is currently having to deal with. So this is the first major step that they need to cross. And the sources say they have reached the 80% subscription that they require. And so we are waiting. The next 24 hours or so, we should hear an announcement from the finance ministry that they've reached this and this is done. However, as we know, the participation have largely been as a result of these four major players. Mainly, it's the banks, the association, the Ghana Association of Bankers signed on to this, mainly them, followed by the Ghana Insurance Association, the Ghana Security Industries, and then some individual bondholders who decided, although they've been given the option to self-exempt, they still went ahead and picked up forms and signed on to the decision. So that formed the 80%. But the focus tonight is this forms the financial sector broadly. We will talk about its implications for them. Now, the deal that they went home with, these three, minus the individual bondholders, because they have a separate arrangement of 10% with a maturity of 5 years. The three above, they don't have that. What did they get? What did they sign on to? They signed on to 5% coupon for this year, right? So that's a significant hit. Many of them were holding on to coupons that were 18 and above, 18%, they're getting 5%. So that's a first hit to the financial sector. Removal of all clauses, this is a benefit for them because that was in the previous memo. Removal of all clauses in the exchange memorandum that gives the Republic the sole control in varying the terms of the exchange. And then another key thing that they got in there is a key provision of liquidity to the institutions if they need it. Now, the reason why this 15 billion is important is that the finance ministry, the Bank of Ghana, acknowledges that the financial sector, particularly the banks, will take a hit. Some of them may not survive. And so because some of them may not survive, you need to find a way to help them survive, right? And so 15 billion is made available. And it will be managed by this Bank of Ghana. And the Financial Stability Council will also advise on adverse, oversee the use of this particular fund. Our donors, our international donors are going to be helping with this particular amount. Now, this is how much they're hoping to restructure, total debt of 575 billion of debt. So this is the breakdown. So for the commercial banks, they were holding on to a total of 59.86 billion of government debt that have been restructured, right? So they were holding on to that. If you restructure this, it's going to take a big hit for their bottom line. Can they survive? We're going to have that conversation. And then we have firms and institutions holding 45.636 billion. Again, they were also asked to participate and take that hit as well. And then you have others, 25 billion. Foreign investors, they're not part of this, so we can't count them in. Pension funds, not part of it, we won't count them in. Rural banks, part of it, right? We have the insurance companies, part of it. SNIT, not part of it because they're part of the pension funds, not part of it. So you have these here facing a significant hit as a result of it, but what will be the impact on them? That is the conversation we're having tonight. In the next few days, once the finance minister comes, we'll be doing a lot more of this, beginning to pick the bones from what has happened and look at what next and the impact. Stay with me. When I return, my guests will join me. They are titans in the industry. They are experts in the banking area. And we'll talk to somebody who has already taken a step in trying to get one of the banks involved to give some clarity on some of the key issues involved when it comes to their trusteeship of one of the major bonds that were restructured. You want to stay with me? After this, we'll get into it. And thanks for joining us on PM Express, indeed, and staying with us. My guest joining me, Joe Jackson, is the Director of Business Operations, Delex Finance and Leasing Company. Also joining me is Dr. Richmond Otuahene. Richmond Otuahene is a banking consultant and lawyer, Martin Kpebu, who is a convener with the Individual Bondholders Association. And I invited Martin to join me because Martin took a step last week to write a letter to one of the banks, and they happen to be the trustees of the ESLA PLC, one of those bonds restructured under this current arrangement. And so I invited him to share with us why that was an important step in getting some closure for the client that he represents, but also the question of what really realistically they were expecting when they wrote that particular letter to the bank. So Martin, I know you've written the letter to the trustees of the ESLA PLC. Have you received any response yet? Hello, Martin. Please unmute for me. Hello, Martin. Okay. Hopefully we can get Martin on. Do we have Martin on? Okay. Okay. Martin will join us pretty shortly, and then we'll get to hear his thoughts on that because I really want to get quickly out of the way. But I have Joe Jackson. Joe, so you are a player in the financial sector. The debt exchange program ended on Friday. Are you good? Is the sector that you operate in where you make your daily bread, is it good? Is it sound? Is it safe?
It's a tough question. The simplest answer is that the financial sector will survive. But it will survive not because it's going to be easy. It will survive because those players in the sector are going to fight tooth and nail to survive. And the Bank of Ghana is also realizing that, listen, this is not going to be easy. So that stability fund is going to be absolutely necessary. Let nobody be confused. If that fund does not happen, situation could get very messy. So it will survive. That's the simplest answer I'll give you. It will survive because the people in the sector are savvy, smart, and there's huge investment which they can't allow to go down the drain. But is there going to be some devastation? You don't want your financial sector just to survive. You want your financial sector to thrive. And at this moment, survive they will, but they will take a hit in the process. And it will take some time before we get to the point where, as institutions, we are thriving. But we will survive. We don't have a choice.
Okay, I like that positive outlook on things. We'll come and break it down for you. What gives you that level of confidence that you'll survive? And what help would you require? 15 billion, is that enough, etc.? We'll get into that. But I want to bring in Dr. Richmond Dutyahene. He's a banking consultant. I want to isolate the banks and focus a bit on them because they form the biggest chunk of the contributions we've seen to this debt exchange program. Dr. Dutyahene, so you've had Joe Jackson. I believe the sector will survive, but the banks in particular, will they survive? Hello, Dr. Dutyahene. Can you hear me? If you can, please unmute and let me hear your contribution. Okay. Hello, Dr. Dutyahene. Hello, Dr. Can you hear me, Dr. Dutyahene? Can you hear me? Please unmute for me, because I think you're still muted. Okay. Let's try and assist with that audio whilst I continue with Joe Jackson. Apologies for that. In the times of Zoom, these things do happen. Doctor, I still can't hear you. Well, let's try and fix that, and then we can get him to join us. Hello, Dr. Dutyahene.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Ivan.
Yes, I can hear you now. Yes, I was asking you, will the banking sector survive?
Well, as Joe said, surviving, you survive. But as to whether you'll be able to continue is another issue. Because if you have done the calculations and what we call, those days, we call it arithmetic of it, the discount factor of 19.3 over the period of 15 years, the losses are quite huge. And the losses in terms of solvency is quite a lot. The figures are just in front of me here. Individual banks for the 23 institutions have done the work, each and every one, to see these surviving and the thriving, to see whether they would actually survive. From what I have in front of me, the capital adequacy or the insolvency is going to be a big challenge. It's going to be a big challenge to the sense that some are taking a hit. When I say a hit. If somebody is holding 9 billion, one holding 9 billion, if you work out with the previous factors, the 19.3, and you come back to the 9 over the period, the losses are quite enormous.
Can you give us the specifics? Can you walk us through your research that you've done? You used to teach at the banking college, yeah. So this is what you do on a daily basis. You've done the maths on this. Walk us through the specifics.
First, we took the 23 banks and then used the discount factor. And don't forget the discount factor that I'm saying is the five outstanding bonds. Some are 19.5, some are 20, some are 19.8. If you aggregate them and average them, you're going to get 19.3. And to confirm this, I think the banks have been told to use a range between 15.7 to 21%. So from my 19%, my 19% is just as good as anything. What happens is that you calculate the revenue without the DDP, the DDP. You see that that bank would have made 23 billion over the period. If you use the 19% as a discount factor, they drop to 19. So if you take the 23 from 8, you're taking a hit of about 4 billion. And if you hit the 4 billion, right to your they call it a financial statement. Now they don't call it balance sheet. They call it a financial position. It's going to hit you hard and it will affect liquidity. It will affect your solvency. In the course of working out, we also tried to use the liquidity aspect. We use the same methodology to see if you drop the coupon rate from the 19, average of 19.3 to 9% averagely. You're losing nominally, you're losing 10.3 over the period. If you use a discount factor of 19, which I have used, there's going to be a liquidity challenges for basically almost all the banks. But the good thing about that one is that if I aggregate the whole lot, then I look at the financial stability support of 15 billion, that will be quite adequate to support the liquidity aspect of it. That is why I'm saying that for the survival, as he said, liquidity-wise, they will be able to survive. But when you come to the insolvency, there hasn't been anything, because in other jurisdictions, the state ended up recapitalizing by making provision to recapitalize some banks. But here, that one is a bit not specifically mentioned. What they have done is that they've done what we call the regulatory forbearances. The regulatory forbearances is that you reduce the capital adequacy ratio maybe from 16 to 10 and 13 to 10. That will not be enough to support the bank. And don't also forget, all these things that we are talking about, they are not the bank's money. People should get it clear. People should get it clear. If the banks had these monies, the figures are mentioned 23 over the period, they will be flying everywhere. It is depositors' money that has gone there. So all that we're saying that if all things being equal, ceteris paribus, all things not being equal, meaning that if everybody walk into the bank to collect his money, the bank will be able to manage this over the period. But if the confidence goes low, and people say, look, we want our money, then we're going to have a serious challenge. And again, let me explain this. Everybody is talking about the losses, but how the losses is being treated under the Financial Reporting Standard 9 or the mark to market. I hear that there have been conversation going on here and there between the banks and the regulator and the ministry to treat how to treat this. Because if I see the losses and it's treated as one-time loss, then we have a big challenge. But if they can agree and let them have a means of staggering it over the period, then the banks could easily survive. And I've heard in a grapevine that they are engaging the ICA, so the ICA can contact the external body for them to agree, because it's been done before. It has been done before. Even when the Americans had a challenge in the financial crisis, 2008, 2009, the International Financial Accounting Standard in the US, had to suspend it. They had to suspend it because if that time it was IAS 39, which is equivalent to IFRS 9, if they don't stop it, if Americans didn't stop it, I don't think we will have the Chase Manhattan, the Citibank, the JP Morgans. They would have gone. So they agreed with the regulator to treat it in such a way that it doesn't hit the solvency of the banks. So it is my prayer that Ghana will take a step. Recently, Nicaragua had a similar issue. They managed to suspend it or not waive it. They suspend it for time and structure it in such a way. Because if you use the IFRS 9, it says that fair value impairment, all losses made must be taken care of in that 1 year. All gains must also be recognized. In this case, if you recognize the losses, the estimated losses that I'm talking about, later would we have a bank that is, apart from, I have the 23, at least 5 will be slightly better. They won't be bad. The league table, 5 will be good. But the other 18 will be seriously hit. They will be serious.
Yeah. I mean, so that's a pretty grim picture. But your conclusion is that with the 15 billion financial stability fund, that should be enough to keep the banks afloat, at least.
Yes, at least I can assure you, with the banks, I think what I have there is about 8 billion. Over a period, it will be 8 billion. 8 billion for the banks, but don't forget about the mutual funds, about the insurances and everything.
Yeah.
So what I'm assuming that with the 8 billion for the banks, according to what the liquidity gap that I have, if it's done that way, the banks would survive. But surviving liquidity does not mean surviving solvency.
Well, what's the difference? What's the difference?
The difference between is that the solvency will clear the institution off. There will be no institution because there will be no capital. There will be no reserves. There will be all those things will be wiped off.
But explain to me, how can you survive liquidity and still remain solvent?
Yeah, this is the reason. The reason why you can survive the liquidity is that because they have made a good provision for the liquidity.
So what you're saying is, what they're saying in effect is that I can still walk to my bank and take money from my account. That's liquidity. But then the solvency, that can happen, but the bank can be insolvent?
It can be insolvent. Because you see, you take the two to tango. The solvency and the liquidity goes together in banking. As people come to withdraw, what happens? And don't forget, let me tell you this. We are not in a world outside the whole world. We are a small island within the world. If your correspondent banks or your relation banks over there sees that your capital adequacy has even fallen below the standard required by what they did after the global financial crisis, you will find it very difficult to even deal with you. Because it means you're good, seriously, you're good for nothing. That is what I'm saying, that we should readily get it home by the bull by the horn and begin to see how we treat that. If we can treat it. Other jurisdictions have done that, and they were allowed. So we should, as we are talking about the stability, we should also be looking at the liquidity so that we'll be able to make the institution, as Joe said, not surviving, but maybe continue to thriving. Grow.
I mean, Joe, you said at the beginning that you are not in the banking space, you're in the general financial space. You said your sector will survive. I mean, we've heard about the banks, Dr. Echahine has addressed it, but in your peculiar space in the financial sphere, what makes you confident that you will survive post the DDE?
Okay, now, I was actually referring to the whole financial sector, not just my space.
Okay.
But I will be honest with you. There's a lot more going on in terms of challenge in the non-bank space than there is even in the bank space. The non-bank space is even more challenged. And it's usually that way. The non-banks are higher risk takers, and that's the structure of their financial. It's not an accident. The structure of the financial system. Some of the non-banks, even as we speak, a few of them had challenges even before this happened. So this is not going to be easy. Now, I'd like to clarify, Doc, one thing you said, and it's important that I add this to it. When you said it's depositors' funds, I love that, because that also is another aspect of the challenge. It's not just the losses that you're going to make from the write down. It is also that you have to pay those depositors' funds. So depending on your weighted average cost of funds, that is an added loss that you're going to have to face, because somebody has given you 100 cedis. Even if it is a savings account and the person is expecting just 5%, that is your depositors' funds. Your weighted average cost of funds is usually much higher. But let's even start talking from savings accounts. 100 cedis taking 5%. You bought bonds with that 500 cedis. Not only have you taken the loss from the downgrade of the coupon rate, not only have you taken a loss in liquidity from the extension of the bond tenors, but you're also going to take a loss in depositors' funds that you have to pay. So there's an added dimension. I took 100 cedis from depositor Kwame Annan. I have to pay him 100 cedis. That money went into a bond. I was expecting 20 or 9. If we use Doc's rate, I was expecting 19. I'll get a weighted average of 9. I've taken a loss on that already. Then I have to add how much I'm paying to Kwame Annan. So this is not funny. This is not funny at all. And I agree with Doc, unless we take some drastic action, and I recommend 2 things. We should look at recapitalization, helping our institutions to recapitalize. Remember that the easiest way to recapitalize would have been to go to the foreign capital market and look for an investor, etc. That is not going to happen because Ghana is toxic. You're not going to get you're not going to get money from outside. Unless these issues are resolved, Ghana is toxic. So we've got to have another plan. And I agree that we should grab the bull by the horns and find a way of making it easier and more profitable for local investors to take part in this process, in spite of the reduced capital adequacy that we are going to see. So, survive, they will survive. Thrive, it's going to be tough.
Joe, do we risk job losses in the financial sector?
Oh, that you can take that to the bank. Every financial institution, the first thing it's going to do is, how do I cut costs in this era? Cutting costs means you're going to have to think about reducing staff costs, reducing subcontractor costs, reducing all the other costs that go to it, including even branch closures. So reducing costs is so important, so part of the process that you listen, the prudent ones have started already. Anybody who hasn't started reducing costs as I speak is in trouble. The prudent ones, last year, no bonus. Reviewing staff. I know of banks at the moment doing a staff audit. Why would you do a staff audit at this moment? Because you want to cut staff. Because you want to move them out. Because you want to cut costs. And remember, a lot of our banks have foreign shareholders. Those shareholders are angry. They are angry because a few years ago, I gave you 400 million cedis. At that time, that was about $100 million. Today, your capital in dollar terms has dwindled by what? 60–70%. They have to write it down off in their books that their shareholding in Ghana has gone down. Are we going to be able to ask them for recapitalization? It's going to be a tough ask.
Gentlemen, stay with me, because there's a part of this that we haven't even begun to touch yet, which is confidence in the financial sector. And that is a big one, because without confidence, you need the confidence to thrive, to move from, to even survive, because you still need people to bring money. Joe, you need people to come to daily finance still wanting to put money in there. And they must have confidence in the entire system to do that. I will come to that part of this question, but I understand that Martin Kpebu is joining me now. Hello, Martin. Hello, Martin. Martin, please unmute for me. Hello, Martin, can you hear me? Do we have...
Hello, Evans.
Fantastic,
yeah,
Martin.
Evans.
Fantastic, Martin.
I can hear you now.
Yes, Martin.
Yes.
So you're representing a client who, a very prominent client of yours, a bondholder who bought ESLA bonds. And you've written to the trustees, one of the banks, you've written to the trustees asking them to state their position on the debt exchange program. Why is that important?
Yeah, so basically, It's because the bank is a trustee in the ESLA design. So the bank was supposed to help protect the bondholders. So it was surprising that the bank wasn't sticking out its neck to, do what has to be done. That's the whole idea. So the bank's feet had to be held to the fire. That's, look, you are a trustee, you have to protect. So we are not seeing the protection that you have to grant. You say it. Yeah, because, from the way that it was designed, there's a trustee in the whole system. Now, trustee, you receive funds, you look to take care of the parties in the transaction. So if there's something like this that's threatening the people you have to protect, and you are not taking any action, then that is a cause for worry. Because you see, Evans, it's in the context of this DD, yes, because the banks are regulated, there's this, it's not just a fear alone, it's true, it's even palpable that the government breathes down the neck of the banks that, look, come on this program, otherwise, look, we could give you headache. And Evans, it's a common secret that a lot of the banks are struggling. They are not in the best of shape. Lots of them are struggling. It's common knowledge. It's been, written about in public here and there. So you see that lots of them are not able to talk, because when you talk or you seem to be going against the grain, then it's like when it's time for government to give liquidity support, government may not give and all that. Yes, so we are aware, but here's the case, this bank is also a trustee, so we have to ask. Yes, if that's the challenge, the bank can say so. But generally, and you see, Evans, what this has taught me about, this DDEP has taught me about Ghanaian system is that I think we are not that financially literate, because the way we've sat down for the banks to be treated in this manner, it's a shame. I realized it too late. Yes, because, and I think, as Dr. Chiahini, yes, who mentioned it, and we say, we are shareholders of the banks. So Evans, how come we sat down as citizens and just watch government twist the arms of the banks to go sign up as shareholders? We didn't care that much. I was like, geez, maybe by the time I realized it, by the time it struck me that we hold shares in some of these banks, they had signed up. So it tells you that we are not that financially literate. Yeah, so it's easy for government to do what government wants. It's a shame. It's a big shame, because now that government has signed up, has signed the agreement with them, this year we are going to lose dividends. We are going to lose dividends. And how come we didn't put up a fight that government shouldn't do this kind of agreements? Because at a point, especially the banks that have very little exposure in these bonds, they were stalling. Yeah, they were stalling. They didn't want to sign. There was a pushback, but citizens didn't come to help them. And then eventually they signed. Or maybe next time we should watch. As society, I think the financial literacy is too high. It's too high for comfort.
Yeah, and Martin, you raise a very important point I want to put to Dr. Richmond Chiahini. Doc, the banks, they were really left with no choice, were they not, to sign on to this or die, really. And knowing the way they are so heavily regulated, and if you talk to people in the grapevine, there's a sense that last time on the same show, Professor Bokwe made the point about how calling out the Bank of Ghana for sitting around the table, and I remember what he said, drinking champagne and conspiring to force banks to swallow this bitter pill at the risk of some of them collapsing. Is that part of the problem? Has that exposed that to a real risk of the Bank of Ghana working with the politicians, of course, who wanted this so desperately that they left the banks no choice than to sign on or die?
Thank you, Evans. Evans, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah, Evans, you see, there is what we call regulatory capture. Regulatory capture simply means that the regulator captures the people. Because in other jurisdiction, like I remember what Mr. Alassani and Danny said, even we have a single obligor, no 25, you cannot lend 25 more of your loans to a group of companies or individuals. But in our regulation, that taking government bonds, there are no regulations there. But they are a risky business. You see, until recent, people consider, the Americans will tell you that there's no free lunch. When they say government bond is risk-free, it is never true. It has happened in Jamaica. It has happened in Argentina. It has happened in Greek. It has happened in Nicaragua. So didn't we learn about these things to put the single even obligor to say that you cannot invest more than 25% of your net worth into government bonds as we did for loans and a credit facility.
But that single obligor limit, it is a regulation. It is law. It is law, right?
It's part of the banking Act.
Banking Act, yes, it's in the Banking Act. But you're saying to me that the banks exceeded that, legal limit in their exposure to the government.
You're right. As I speak to you, a bank had a bond of 9 billion as against a loan portfolio of 4 billion.
Wow.
Twice the bonds. Because when I said it about 2 years ago in my delivery at Kimbiski, I said we are doing what we call lazy banking. Lazy banking in the sense that we want easy way out of banking. Buy government bonds, buy treasury bills, declare good profit, declare good income, pay good dividend. But that is no banking. That is no banking. That is not how the British colonial master taught us about banking. Banking, the regulation must be tough for both investments and as well as the loans and credit facility. But that was mute. So the banks find it an easy way of going. And let me tell you a secret. Some of the banks from other jurisdictions, some of them nearly exited when they saw these bonds. They called their board members and tell them, look, the way you people are going there, we are afraid of it. Some of them warned them. The mother company warned some of the banks here. But the question is that because you see the enabling environment has been created for easy banking and lazy banking, we ended up. But that is not what I'm trying to say. There is a regulatory capture. And when there is a regulatory capture, that is what happens. The regulator could, even not a part of a law, could have advised that, look, brothers and sisters, we are going too far. So stay within certain framework.
Yeah, I mean, but here's a regulator that has by itself, the BOG lent more than 40 billion cedis, more than $3 billion to the government. So the regulator itself is doing what they're not supposed to do. So where's the moral authority in checking the banks when the regulator itself is also, heavily exposed to the government?
That is why I said it's called regulatory capture. When the referee tends to be a player and a linesman, you end up the way we have ended. Because a referee must make sure that the rules of the games are stuck to and obeyed. But unfortunately, even before you talk about these 33 billion, they also had about 10% of the 137 the bonds before that they came out. They're also part of it. They have a bonds of about 10 billion.
Yeah, they're also equally exposed to the debt exchange program.
Exactly. So that is what I'm saying is that yesterday I was saying something and some people were talking about the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The Bank of Ghana Act, as amended 2016, Act 918, it says that government cannot borrow more than 5% of the past year's revenue.
But they suspended that in the midst of the COVID crisis.
No,
COVID was
they suspended the Fiscal Responsibility Act. The Fiscal Responsibility Act is only for the government for budget deficit when we were in COVID. But the Bank of Ghana Act amended 619, I have never seen any suspension. So when you quote the fiscal response, you are quoting the country overall fiscal deficit, which is supposed to be within 5% of the GDP. Unfortunately, they have gone the other way, and they find ourselves. So we are in a serious issue. I have done their own calculation, even with their little money they have there. I was asking myself, if this thing is applied as it is, where would that bank, the regulator, be?
Yeah,
So it's not interesting.
Joe, we recently, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, did a massive financial sector cleanup. I mean, from everything I'm hearing tonight, it doesn't appear to me that we learned any lesson from that.
Listen, in a sense, you're right. Right? I must admit that quite a few changes have happened with the institutions, and they are much better run than before, but not enough. Listen, some of us have been crying for the last 3-4 years. Ghana is broke. Ghana is broke. Ghana is broke. Now you would ask yourself that, was I reading weren't we all reading the same financial statement from the government? Did we not see the government spend its revenue from 3 items adding up to over 70%, till now where 2 items add up to over 100%? And in that state, as prudent bankers, how do we justify lending so much to the government? It's a question we have to look within and ask ourselves. If Ghana is Joe,
you make a very important point. I want to reduce this to the person who's listening who doesn't understand what you're saying. You made a very important point. You're saying that the banks lend, they must lend to me, right? So they check my books, and I'm using the government analogy. The government is just a human being like me. They are lending to both of us. The government in their budget is telling you that I am broke. I am spending all my resources and my revenue on paying compensation and servicing debt. And yet the banks were still lending heavily to that man. So in my case, I am broke. I don't have any money. I don't have a house. I'm living on borrowed money. And the banks are giving me more loans. That is what you're saying what the banks were doing.
I'll go beyond that. I am on record as saying, even on your program, that if the government of Ghana came to me as Delex, I will not lend to them. Let's not hide away from the facts, huh? The bank, the numbers were not good. And we kept lending to this government. And as we speak, there's another crisis brewing. Which crisis is that? Treasury bill rates are going through the roof. We're using short-term financing that was supposed to be managing short-term liquidity challenges for government funds as a way to borrow for consumption. This is a crisis that is brewing. And yet, what do we see? In the midst of all this, each time they go to the auction, these treasury bills are oversubscribed. I have clients who come to me and say, why are you offering me such low rates? I won't take it. I'll go and do treasury bills. I say, yes, I'm offering you low rates because that's the rates that I can give you that is sustainable. Because when you come back and you demand your money, I have to pay you. And yet, willy-nilly, and I agree with Martin, we're all sitting there seeing the Martin apologies, but we're seeing this thing and another crisis brewing. We're seeing the cost of financing treasury bills go through the roof. And everybody is quiet. I don't know. I really don't know. And And all of us must look in the mirror in the financial sector. And the banks, we must look in. You can't just pass the buck only to the central bank. The central bank must deal with these issues. All of us must look in the mirror. And Doc, thank you. You made the point very clear. The law says that as financial institutions, we can't lend to one person more than 25% of our capital. That's a single obligor limit. I'm saying that not only did we breach that limit, we breached that limit, right? Even when that institution, the Bank of Ghana, the government of Ghana, when you look at its financial books, no way you'd have given it a business loan.
I mean, let's talk about, and Martin, I want to start with you on this. So have you heard anything from the bank in question since you asked the question? Tell me what your position was on the restructure of the ESLA debt.
No, we haven't heard anything yet. So let's give a few more days and then we'll see. Yes, nothing yet. Let's just see.
Now, there's a part of this. There's a part of this. Hello, Martin. I'm losing you, Martin. Martin, please. Martin, I'm losing you. Hello, Martin. Okay, we've lost him. I mean, but there's a part of this I want to end with, which is the confidence. And Joe, I'll start with you because you were directly there in the financial sector broadly. Joe, tell me, what is your biggest fear? Yeah, some jobs may be lost, but you're confident that you survive. However, do you believe post the closure of the debt exchange program, if tomorrow they announce 80% we moved on, that people will still have confidence to bring you money and trust you with it going forward?
You see, that equation is simple. So long as somebody knocks on my door and I keep paying, the confidence will be there. We're very clear with that in the Lex Finance, and I'm sure the whole banking sector is clear. What is required, whilst we quietly deal with our solvency and capital adequacy ratios, we must first deal with the liquidity issues. The liquidity is somebody comes to my door and says, I want 5,000 cedis that I gave you. You should be able to return that money. So long as you return that money promptly, right? You return that money without any haircuts. It's the government that's given the haircuts. The financial sector hasn't talked about giving any haircuts. The confidence will be there. So it comes down to the issue of this liquidity fund. If the fund operates as it has been promised, if it is properly funded, you see, liquidity is not an issue you can postpone. When somebody needs liquidity today, you can't tell him come back next week because the fund doesn't have money. The fund must be there. It must have full funding even before the problems are thought of arising. So long as that happens, so long that the fund is transparent, so long as the fund details are clear, so long as we all know how to access that fund and use it for our liquidity purposes, both banks and non-banks and all other affected institutions, the confidence will be there. There'll be no problem. Okay. The problem will come if we've all acknowledged that the liquidity issues are going to be there. But that's not a big problem. We've also acknowledged that the fund is there to mitigate and prevent a collapse of the system because of the liquidity issues. Let that fund happen. Let that fund be fully funded. Let it be transparent. Let there be no delays, and we will survive. And then after survival, we will think of thriving.
And Dr. Chiahene, what about the trust to invest? Because people who are invested in bonds, government securities, the safest. We've seen what has happened with that. Those mutual funds were trying to withdraw them, and at one point, Data Bank had to shut their offices because people were just assaulting their staff. What would this do to the confidence of clients to put their money back into the system and invest for future?
Thank you very much, Evans. I think Joe made a very, very, very important contribution when he was talking about the cost of depositors' fine. It is not only the cuts that we've taken, the hits we've taken there. You've given a deposit, somebody has taken a fixed deposit of 20%. He's giving you his money, 20%, for a term of 6 months. Now, you have taken a hit. You cannot do likewise to the customer. Simply, you're going to increase, as Joe said, the losses are going to be very, very astronomical from the mismatch part of the deposit and the loans bit of it. So what Joe is saying is real, To go back to your point, confidence thrives on, Joe has said, transparency. Transparency. What is lacking in this country? Those of us who have stuck our neck out to speak on issues about transparency and candidly and openly, we haven't had it easy at all. I'm telling you. But you see, you need some people like us who will sit behind to help you to shape the system. We are Ghanaians. So if you want to build it, we can build the confidence and trust. At least, even with all these hulu balu, people go to bank and pay money in. It means that Ghanaians want to save. But we must make sure that the transparency, as Joe said, must be a cardinal part of the transaction, so that people will know that we are back on the road. So for trust to come in, for trust and confidence to come in, we need transparency in everything we do. Otherwise, when the information started filtering out, that, oh, when I went there, it was not done. They said go and come in the moment. The next time it comes to, why? What information asymmetry? We call it information asymmetry. If it gets done, then it can be distorted and affected. So let us be very open about the way we are operating this. Let us be transparent about it. Let us be candid. Let us be open to others. When we do critique, I don't think Joe criticized. What Joe did, or what he does, is critiquing. There is a difference between critiquing and criticizing. Joe will criticize you or I will criticize you, but I'll tell you the solution to your problems. But in this country, as I sit here, they don't want to hear it. They blind me in names. They call me names. That's why this afternoon, I said I was going to give you a data. But I got a call from all over the place when I said I was going to give you. They threatened me here and there. But what I'm saying that it's a research I have done. It must be published for people to see. I've already published some, and I will continue to publish. So what Joe is saying, confidence, trust, and confidence comes with transparency, trusting people, believing them, saying that these guys can do it, and they will do it. And the industry will begin to pick up.
Yeah.
We pick up.
We need it to survive and thrive going forward.
Yes. And don't forget, Evans, what we haven't even talked about, what nobody has talked about. There is corporate tax. There is fiscal corporate financial stability tax. And there is a fiscal tax on the bank. They're not going to do it for the next 5 years. So your domestic generation, revenue generation is going to go down. Yeah. If you say the tax rate you go to, it's not going to go, because the banks, the financial institution, if you see the amount of taxes they were paying, and for the next 3 years, maybe 4 years, we may not get to that level. All that people should say, we should look at it, the output, the falling output, unemployment, taxation, all those things should become openly, so that we all know that we are in the same boat.
Well, and thank you very much, Dr. Chuahende. Thank you to you as well, Joe. Always a delight talking to you both. And Martin Kpebu as well. We'll wait to see what the financial institution in Question Road 2 says on this as citizens begin to hold the financial sector accountable. Enjoy the rest of your evening.